you've seen Classic Game Room review Atari 2600 games and the Nintendo Entertainment System controller and the cartridge design of the Magnavox Odyssey 2, and you might think we're a bunch of idiots, but we're about to sink to a whole new low. And by low I mean reaching a whole new height of excellence. This is the cartridge design for the Sega Genesis, or the Mega Drive depending on where you live, one of the greatest video game consoles of all time, and a very unique cartridge design thanks to our friends at Sega. Let's take a look at this thing and what makes it so awesome. And I'm not just talking about MUSHA and the cool robot, but the overall cartridge itself, how it fit into the game system, and why you should have a whole bunch of these things. Now if you set the Pac-Man game cartridge down from the Atari 2600, you can see the label on top and you can read the text. It's great for stacking them on your shelves. My only disappointment with the Sega Genesis cartridges is that when you set them with their labels facing up, the text is then upside down on the side of the cartridges. That's a minor pet peeve, and it really doesn't matter when there's such cool looking games as MUSHA out there anyway. The cartridge artwork for Sega Genesis games was all over the place. You could get really amazing artwork like this one for Mega Turrican, and a really nice design here for Herzog Zwei. You can see on some of the older games they had their little design motif there with the black and white checker boxes. It says Sega Genesis. You have a giant robot crushing things, tanks, missiles, airplanes. This is all a winning recipe for success right here. You can see that the artwork would wrap around the top of the cartridge, and here's another good one for Revenge of Shinobi. Other games were not so lucky. Take for instance Fire Shark. Ignore the used video logo, but you know, this certainly is not a very exciting label for a pretty good game. In some cases the back of the cartridge was actually a much better design than the front. And that would hold true for Strider, one of the worst cartridge artwork designs I've ever seen, and this certainly does not do the incredible game justice. I mean, seriously, couldn't you have done better than this guy? This guy looks like he could be Prince Adam's brother from He-Man, who was kicked out of the family after stealing candy bars from a local truck stop. Sega Genesis games came in a nice sturdy plastic case that looked like that. It's a similar size to a PlayStation 2 game. It's made of durable plastic. You can still use it for a drink coaster. Overall it works pretty well. You open that thing up and there's the game inside. You can see how the game is actually held in by two little clips that fit around the curved side of the Sega Genesis cartridge. So in order to get the game out of here, you would dig your thumb in there and rip it out, which sort of felt like you were going to break it, but I don't think I've ever broken one of these things. Now put it back in, you just shove it in there, lock it in, and held the game pretty tight, as you can see. Came with instructions on the inside for games like Cyborg Justice. There were lots of very creative Genesis games, and boy, it's not likely you'd see one of these games come out anymore. Most of the games would tell you on the back if they were 1 or 2 player, give you a couple pictures and description of the game just like they do today. Create the ultimate cyborg warrior. Sounds fantastic. Give you the same little Sega Genesis design elements on the side that we saw on some of the cartridges with the black and white checkers. Sega seal of quality. And let's take a look at the actual cartridge styling itself now. Look at that guy's hand being cut off. The Sega Genesis cartridges themselves are made of a very sturdy plastic. You can see it's protecting the innards here. There's the actual game itself, the part that plugs into your Genesis. They have little slots there on the side, and easy to tell how this fits into the top of your Genesis, and we'll take a look at that. And they give you a nice little thumb thing here, so you could pull the game out easily. Sega designed everything well, and like their controllers and the game consoles themselves, these things are built to last. And I don't think I've ever found a completely dead Sega Genesis cartridge. If you have one that won't work, try cleaning these things out first with a Q-tip. And don't even need to use any liquid, just brush them out and you'll be surprised how much dirt these collect after about 15-20 years. One of the great things about cartridges is that the game consoles themselves have fewer moving parts than the newer video game systems, so they don't break as easily. So after 20 years or 19 years, this Sega Genesis works perfectly, You take the cartridge, there's only one way to put it into the top of the unit here. Insert it, push it down, locks into place, very tight, very snug, one of the great things about the Genesis. And when you're done playing your game, thanks to that handy little indent back there, you can reach in with your hand, pull the game out, and then put it on the shelf for storage for the next time that you play it. Now, depending what game company was actually making the video game, sometimes the cartridge design would vary. You can see here with Nhl Hockey, the first one from Electronic Arts, they give you this very bizarre looking cartridge with the yellow thing that certainly is unmistakable that this is an EA game. And this is much larger than the standard Sega Genesis cartridge, but still fits right into the game console with no problem. And if you're collecting Sega Genesis games, you're probably already aware that a few other companies had different designs like this one. Genesis games are a similar size to an Atari 2600 cartridge. Of course, in order to play it, you would insert it into the machine like that. Now, it's a whole lot smaller than the Nintendo Entertainment System games, as you can see. There's an enormous collection of Sega Genesis games out there to buy and collect and play, and you should immediately run out, start building your Sega Genesis library. Let's see what the dog thinks of this thing. So what's your favorite Genesis game? Is it Revenge of Shinobi? Is it Herzog Zwei? Strider? Thunder Force 3? Is your favorite Sega Genesis game Going for a Walk? How about a walk? Yeah!